Hi, welcome to my session on Google Classroom for parents and caregivers. I'm Shauna Wooldridge. I'm a fourth grade GATE teacher at Fritch Elementary School. This is my 11th year as a teacher. I've taught in a variety of elementary schools. I've taught at 2 middle schools in Carson City and was a high school dean last year. I'm a Google certified trainer, a Microsoft Innovative Educator, and a parent. I have a third grader, a first grader, and a preschooler. And I really do know how hard this is. And Google has some great tools to help make this process simpler, which is what we're going to go over today. So before we go into some of the issues and then look at some strategies and ways to fix those, I wanted to go over the positive outcomes of digital learning because there are definitely positive aspects of this process. So one is that students learn what I call digital perseverance, which is that ability to problem solve when something's not working for you, the ability to find assignments, find things that you lose, recognize that you may have to redo something if you lose it, that whole process, which I know kids are struggling with right now, but once we get over the hump, then they have those skills for the future. They also learn study skills, especially for students that are on the hybrid model or on remote learning. They're really learning how to set a schedule, how to set up how they're going to study and how they're going to learn, which is really powerful. Students acquire digital skills and gain independence in their learning, which is something that's really, really amazing about this process, as long as we help them to find these skills and that independence. Additionally, for parents, we have the ability to see what our children are doing at a much higher degree than we typically do. The fact that we have everything on Google Classroom or a lot of things on Google Classroom means that you can see what they're doing in their classes. You can see the level of work that they're doing, and you can start to see a little bit of how they learn, which is really, really amazing. Now, with digital learning, it is a challenging process. And there's 4 kind of ways that I think of as far as what makes that challenging. So it is challenging to find assignments if you don't really know what you're looking for. Things don't always work, and we have to teach kids how to problem solve when that happens. Time management and organization issues are really hard, and it's what keeps kids from kind of getting the good stuff of digital learning. So once we fix that, then we have a greater degree of ability to fix things. And then parents don't always know how to help. And I think that's really hard when we're trying to help our child that is struggling and not really knowing how to help. Even myself as a teacher, I'm not in my son's classrooms, so I don't necessarily know what their expectations are or what the work should look like. So we can talk through kind of how to do that. If you have any questions, you can write them down in the comments. I would love to answer any questions that you have, and any ways that I can help that's not necessarily in this presentation, you can go ahead and put into the comments. All right, so let's get into it. So the first thing that we have as an issue is that it can be challenging to find assignments. Google Classroom has 4 areas that really help in finding assignments and looking through and seeing what's there. So that is the stream, classwork, view your work, and the class drive folder. All of these areas really work together. So we're going to look at my son's Google Classroom that I put him in my sample class. So we're stepping outside of my classroom. I'm inviting you into my home as we sit down at our table, which is our workspace right now, for them to be able to do their work. So in going into my son's Google Classroom, he opens up and he sees this. So he's got some specials classrooms, he's got his work from his teacher, and then he has the classroom here with me. So we've got some materials in here that are modeled after my Google Classroom. So I'm logged in as him. And this is my sample classroom. It's modeled after my 4th grade classroom that I have right now, which is an evolving process because I find new things that I like about Google Classroom and I change things. But the first place that you come into when you open up the Google Classroom is the stream. So the stream is kind of like Facebook. It is a collection of either everything or nothing, depending on how you set it up. But the default setting, so for example, I have set this differently. So I'm going to go into Google Classroom and I'm going to set it how the default setting is, which is to show attachment, to show condensed notifications. So when I click save there, it will automatically update on the Google Classroom here. So when I refresh, and now it's me, so we're going to go into all right, so now we're in his. All right, so now what we have here is I have my son who is apparently writing me a message. So I have him writing me a message, which students have the ability to do in the default settings of Google Classroom. I also have all of the assignments that we have posted or I've posted. I also have announcements, but as you can see, it's really hard to kind of see where the assignments, what they are. Like I can click on them and I can kind of see, but then it bounces me off to another area. So I always say to stay out of the stream as much as possible. So if your child is looking for information and materials, they should stay out of the stream. It is great for announcements. It's great for looking at information. I would say to not allow them to write posts because then it just becomes more and more like Facebook. And we don't necessarily want them to be able to make it more challenging, and other students would be able to see this. So the best place to find assignments is to go into classwork. So in classwork, you have all of the assignments in one place, and they're organized based on how the teacher wants to organize them. So I like to organize them by week. Some elementary school teachers organize them by subject. A lot of secondary teachers that I've worked with organize them by week as well, because it makes a little bit more sense on the secondary level. But you have the ability to look in and see the information that's there, find the assignment, and go from there. If you want to see it in, once again, just a really kind of condensed list, you can go into view your work. And when you go to view your work, you have a list of all the assignments. And so I can see which ones have been turned in. I can see which ones are missing, and we'll talk about due dates here in just a little bit, and which ones are assigned. So I can just go through and really easily see this. I can also click on missing if I want to, tell my son what he's doing on a Saturday because he didn't get assignments done. Then I would be able to look at this list and say, okay, here's what you got. I can also look at anything that's been returned with a grade, which I haven't done for him, would show up here. You would also be able to see the grades here, but this is really the only place that you can see those grades because there's not necessarily a grade section in here. The other thing that's really great in finding assignments, especially if you lose assignments, would be the class drive folder. So if I click on the class drive folder, then I have everything that he has done. So I'm looking at my son's Google Classroom. So I'm looking at everything that he's done in here, and he can find everything that he's done. So for example, if he is looking at this Google Classroom or this essay, and he has that in here, he's done a ton of work on this essay, but he's screwing around, and instead of clicking the turn in button, he clicks the X here. And it goes away. And then he's frantic because he spent so much time on that essay and he doesn't know where it is. Well, nothing is gone. Nothing is missing. In order to delete this fully, you have to go through about 3 clicks where it asks you and asks you and asks you, are you sure that you want to delete it? So everything's saved here in this class drive folder. And so what I can do is if I'm still like trying to find it, because I'm gonna try to go through and attach it again. But if I click on my Google Drive, I'm just not really sure what's there. And he has an assignment here that is in his recents, but that's not the one that I want. What I can do is I can go into this class drive folder. And when I click on this, then I see the essay that he's done. I wrote this one, so I spent so much time on this. Now, once I've clicked on this assignment, when I click to add or create and I click on Google Drive, it's now moved it up to his recent, so I can just double click on it and then it comes back. So I have that ability to just really easily put in information of what's there for students to have. So now let's talk about things not working. So a lot of times you'll have assignments that may not work. Maybe an app doesn't work. Maybe the teacher forgot to attach the assignment. Sometimes we have assignments in other platforms that we as teachers might push out the assignment, but forget to assign it in the other platform, which is something I did this morning. And I had my students messaging me, letting me know that it was not working. And I always say for parents to really put the ownership on your child and ask them to contact the teacher first. And there's two ways that they can do that in Google Classroom. And if they're still not getting a response, then obviously as parents, we advocate for our kids, and then we can reach out to the teacher and see if we can get some resolution on that. But always try to have your child message first. And then we'll look in Google Classroom on how to have them message, and we'll look at class comments and private comments. So once again, I'm having my son open up his Chromebook and we're looking at his Google Classroom together. And we're trying to find, so let's say once again, we're trying to find this assignment. So he has deleted it, it is gone, he doesn't know where it is. Now he's got two options in any assignment. He can look at the class comments or he can look at private comments. Class comments are gonna go to everyone. So let's say that I forgot to attach something here. He might write a class comment just to ask if everybody else is seeing the same thing. So he might say, I can't see my first draft. Is anyone else having the same issue? Now in the default settings of Google Classroom, and this is something that you can change, but anytime that students put in a comment on anything, teachers get an email. So they get an email that comes to them that just says, here's your comment, and there's a really nice little link that you click on it and it brings you right to the assignment and right to the message. So it's a really easy way to make that transition. And it's always fun for students that decide that they're going to comment something random on the very, very bottom post of the stream, thinking that I'm not going to see it when I get an email and I get to show them that, yes, I did in fact see what they were doing. And teachers can mute students. So I typically put them in timeout with a mute for a little bit so that they can kind of realize that we don't. Class comments are things that should be just for help. Or I know a lot of students are struggling with the lack of socialization right now. I do allow my students to write some messages back and forth on our stream posts to each other if they want to kind of have a conversation, which is nice for them. But let's say that he realizes that he messed up. So he might put a private comment, help me, please. I think I deleted my first draft. Okay, so he puts that private comment in, I think I deleted my first draft, and then I'm gonna get the email. Now, additionally, because I'm also, we'll see if this will work, logged in as myself, if I go into the first draft, I've got two messages. So I've got this one in class comments. This is me as the teacher side. And I also have this one that's actually in his. So I can go in and write back to him, please look in your class drive folder, reattach your first draft. And I can send that back to him. Now he doesn't get an alert unless he's using his email address that this is set up for. That's the only way that he would get the an alert, because they do go by email. But he can also just kind of leave this open until I go through and respond, and then he'll be able to go through that process. So it's really helpful just to kind of look at the different ways to put comments so that we can get help for our kids. So another thing that's really important in digital learning is time management and organization. And Google Classroom has a couple ways to help with that. So we have the to-do section, classwork, and due dates that are really helpful on the time management and organization issues. So let me show you what that looks like. So if I go to all of our classes, I have this to-do button right here. I also have a to-do section in this 3 lines that I can click on that and be able to go to this really handy section. And this was something that I didn't know existed until my husband was frustrated at trying to help our boys. And he was talking to me and said, I really want something that has all of their assignments. And then when they complete them, they drop off and they move over to somewhere else. And so we pulled open my son's Google Classroom and we looked through, and this was what we found. So you can, it defaults to all classes. So you get to see all of their assignments from all their Google Classrooms in one place, which I think is so helpful, especially for secondary students that have many Google Classrooms that they're navigating. All of that information is in one place. You can also separate it out by group. If you really wanted to just see one particular classroom, you could do that. But all of the assigned are things that are not overdue. So the due date hasn't passed or there's no due date. And there's a lot of assignments here that have no due date. There are some that are due this week. So he would know that he needs to be completing these assignments. There are also nothing from next week. There's something for later on. So he can go through and see what it is that he needs to complete. He can also click on the missing section and look at anything that is missing. So this is stuff that's missing from this week. Maybe I want to look at last week. Maybe I want to look at something that's earlier. All of these things are there for him to do. And so some of these are optional. And then these ones obviously are from the sample classroom. But these things, I would look at this and say, okay, he needs to do this right now, because that's in his actual third grade classroom. So that would be something that I as a parent would be looking for. And the cool thing with this is that in this done section, if I go through and complete one of these, so let's say we're going to sit down, we're going to do all of his missing assignments. And I say we, but he would be doing all of his missing assignments. If he clicks on it, he does the work, and then he clicks turn in. What will happen is in that to do section, it's no longer in the missing, it's now in the done. So I can go through last week and I can see that he just did this assignment. So I've seen it drop off and I know that that's now done and it's turned in. And yeah, it says done late, but that doesn't matter so much in the grand scheme of things. It's really just going through and looking at where do the assignments fall and how do we help them figure it out. Another thing that's really helpful in time management and organization is the classwork. So obviously the topics are here that are helpful for us, but really what we're looking for is a change of colors. So when a teacher sets up a Google Classroom, it is automatically assigned a color. We don't get to choose that. You just get what you get. So this particular classroom, when I created it, has a dark blue color that's assigned to it. I also have a dark gray Google Classroom and a green, and I think I have a red. So you have different colors, but the same thing happens when things are turned in or things that don't need to be done. So anything that still he has not turned in, it's in the assigned or in the missing, is going to be that dark blue color. Anything that is a material, so these are things that don't need to be completed, they're just for information purposes, are light gray. And anything that's been turned in becomes light gray. So if I go into this one and I say, okay, we need to complete this and we need to turn it in. So I mark it as done. And then when I go back to my classwork, now it's light gray. So me as a parent can go in and say, okay, open up your classwork and let's just scan. So I can just go in and scan and make sure that everything is light gray that needs to be done. And I can look at the things that are still blue to decide if that's something that he needs to sit down and do right now, or if that's something that is going to be completed later on. So it's a really easy way to just really quickly scan and see what they need to be able to do. The other thing that's really helpful that you don't have any control over as a parent is due dates. So when you look at your classes, you're able to see things that are due. So anything that has a due date that's coming up soon will show up in the main page on that classroom. If I click in on here, I can also go in and look at the upcoming in the stream. And that brings me to my to-do section for this classroom, for those things that are upcoming. The other thing that I have is with due dates. Okay, so everything in week 12 was due on the 13th. that means that all of those things, once the 13th comes and goes, it gets moved into missing. One thing that kids are really, really terrible at, well, and I would say all people are really terrible at, is we're really awful at prioritizing. So we as parents and we as teachers need to help kids be able to prioritize stuff. Kids will choose the easiest and the most fun thing that they see as an assignment. They won't necessarily choose the one that they know needs to be done. Even really smart kids, even really wonderful kids and struggling kids, I've taught a whole gambit of students, and it is very similar problems across the board. And so you have to be able to help them prioritize. Due dates are something that really helps with that. And the due dates will actually link to the Google Calendar for that classroom. So every time that a classroom gets assigned, they get a Google Calendar, and they can use that to help them as well to know which assignments need to be done. But you do have to use that Google Calendar, and that only works with due dates. Things that have no due dates will not show up on the Google Calendar. So it's a little bit hard to use. It's not one that I super recommend using, just because it is a little bit challenging to kind of navigate that. All right, so then we looked at this done and done section. Last one that I want to talk about is not necessarily a Google Classroom thing, but just kind of something that we're all struggling with as parents with this digital learning, is not knowing how to help. So there are certain ways that you can help. There are ideas of how much you should help. One thing with Google Classroom is that depending on how it's set up, and Carson City School District, Google Classrooms are set up to only allow students and staff to join them. You have to have a Carson City School District email in order to do that. So parents aren't able to join. And so you really have to make it a routine to sit down with your kid, have them open up Google Classroom and look at Google Classroom with them through their account. Is very much the best way to do that. When you're supporting your child or finding out how to support them, something that I always talk about with my students, with my own children, and with my parents is that the kids need to take ownership for their learning. It's powerful for them to be able to go through this process, even as hard as it is, but they need to know that it is their job to do the assignments, not yours. So with my 3rd and 1st grader, it's been the same conversation that I have with my 4th graders, which is, you are the student, not your grandfather that watches you on Monday, not your dad that has you on the other days. You need to go on to Google Classroom. You need to be learning this stuff. And if you need to ask for help, then ask for help, but they're the student. You can have expectations for them, and you should have expectations for them. And you should be able to tell them why the work is important and why it is something that they need to be doing. Help them with organization, help them set up a place and a time to do schoolwork, because those are really, really hard things to kind of figure out and navigate. When you're helping, you want to monitor but not hover. When you're looking at these assignments, you're really just looking to make sure that they are completed and turned in. A lot of times kids will go through and will just click on something, and I mean, it's been what I've been showing you, is that I'm just marking as done. There's no work that's being done here. I'm just going through and marking as done. Well, when I go into those assignments, I can see that they haven't done anything. And so then I can unsubmit and have them finish the assignment. Don't correct their work. That's really something that the teacher can do. Mistakes are really important for teachers to see. It helps us to know what we need to focus on, what we need to help our students with. And so those mistakes are really, really valuable in the learning process. If you have any students that are spending hours and hours and hours and hours of time working, you really need to step in and tell them that they are done. With students that are struggling on their learning, can often spend way too much time on assignments. Students that are gifted and are perfectionists normally will really struggle with this unstructured time. And so it's really nice to kind of help them interpret the directions, help them brainstorm, celebrate with them, and set that schedule for them to navigate through so that they can start to see when they might be a little bit off track. are things that are really, really helpful and valuable with us. So as we get through the end of the issues, and we've got a couple more slides for you. Once again, if you have any comments, just write them down below and I will answer anything that you have. So here's some do's for Google Classroom. Remind your child that they are the student. Like I said, it's something that's really important and empowering for our students. They need to know that they have control over their learning and they have control over what they do in Google Classroom. Check to make sure assignments are completed and turned in. That's something that I really say is everybody's job. It's my job as the teacher. It's my job as the parent. It's my son's job or my student's job. Everybody needs to check to make sure the assignments are completed and turned in. Set a schedule that works for your student. I know that's hard right now with what we've got going on, but as consistent as you can get to a schedule is going to be what's absolutely best in making this process work. Help your student find a quiet working space, especially if they're going on Zoom meetings or Google Meets or whatever it is that they're using. It can be really hard to work within distraction that's happening around us, as well as, you know, for assignments, we have to have a certain level of quiet to be able to work. And so having them find that quiet working space is really, really helpful. For some don'ts with Google Classroom, don't do the work for them. I know I help my sons with typing at times, but then I also have shown them how to use speech to text so that they can get that as well. Because that part is hard. And so you want to help them out, which that's fine. But make sure that you're not doing the work for them. Don't correct their mistakes. Even if you're typing for them, type it word for word of what they're saying. Don't stress if you lose something. Everything is auto-saved. Everything is somewhere. And if it takes a little bit to find it, that's fine. But everything's saved. So if something gets lost, don't stress. We'll be able to find it. Don't be too hard on yourself or your student. Don't forget that this is really hard for everyone. It's hard for teachers. It's hard for parents. It's hard for students. Everybody is really challenged in this to really make this work. And this is a really hard process. So, you know, give yourself a pat on the back for whatever it is that you're able to do in this. And if we keep working on this and we keep trying to make this better, little itty bitty bit at a time, we're really going to be setting up our students to be very, very successful in a very different world than we grew up in. And those struggles that we're going through have a purpose and they're hard and it's terrible at times, but remind yourself you're doing the best that you can, brush off any stress, and just try to be there for your kid as best as possible. And then to wrap up, any comments that you have or questions that you have, I would love to help out with anything else that I did not cover in this. But I really did enjoy having you watch my session. If there's anything else that you would like to see, I can definitely go through and come up with some more ideas and videos for you. So thank you so much for watching.